Started.
We ready to start?
Is it rolling?
Well, it's time.
I'd like to bring the special meeting of the Ravenna City Council meeting to order. Ms. Gregory, would you please read the announcement?
You are hereby notified that a special meeting of the Ravenna City Council has been called for Monday, July 21st, 2025 at 5:30 PM. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss and/or act upon ordinance 2025-73 regarding a new SCADA system, recap of previous special meeting discussions, and a discussion of new council initiatives.
Could you read the roll, please?
Mr. Kelfi?
Here.
Ms. West? Here. Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Here.
Mr. Maravich?
Here.
Ms. Michael? Mr. Harper?
I am aware that Ms. Michael is not going to make it tonight. I'm not sure if Mr. Harper is just running a little late. But can we have a motion to excuse them?
So move.
Yes.
Second. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, so again, this is one of our informal meetings. We talk about more general strategic type of ideas that anybody has on their mind. We did include, however, the SCADA system ordinance because we didn't get a chance to approve it the last regular meeting. The ordinance was not prepared in time. We do have it on this special meeting, and it does have an emergency clause. Can I just informally ask, does anybody have any objection to passing this? No. Okay, then let's start out with the, oh, and here's Mr. Harper. If you could start out with that ordinance, and we'll move on to the other items on the agenda.
I don't know if Mr. Harper heard what you just mentioned.
Oh, I just meant, we're going to present the SCADA ordinance, and I just wanted to make sure everyone knew it had an emergency clause, and if anybody had any objection to the actual ordinance.
Ordinance 2025-73, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids for replacing the SCADA system for the wastewater treatment plant and appropriating $1.35 million from the Sanitary Capital Improvement Fund and declaring an emergency.
I believe this is from the Utilities Committee. Mr. Moskin?
Yes, this is a critical part of their operation. Without this, they cannot function properly anymore. It's totally computerized. And since this was implemented, I believe 20 years ago, then it is created a more efficient way for operations overall. It's decreased costs overall. This might sound like, well, I'm not saying it's not a lot of money, but it is, but at the same time, it has decreased cost and increased efficiency quite a bit over the operation. And parts of this are actually totally obsolete anymore. So you can't even fabricate some parts that will go down.
Other comments or questions about this ordinance? Hearing none, do we have a motion to waive the 3 separate readings?
So move.
Second.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Mr. Kelfi?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Maravich?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes. And there's an emergency clause. Do we have a motion to enact the emergency clause?
So move.
Second.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Maravich?
Yes.
Mr. Kelfi?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes. And do we have a motion to approve the ordinance?
So move.
Second.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Ms. West?
Yes.
Mr. Kelfi?
Yes.
Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Mr. Maravich?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes. Okay, that ordinance stands approved. The rest of the meeting, we won't have any other similar type action. It's just the ongoing discussions we've had about new initiatives, ideas for improvement in the city through city council generated discussions. I wanted to start off just to kind of recap a little bit some of the things we've talked about. I brought up a school-based initiative. I know a lot of these haven't really gotten off the ground yet, but we are making some plans to move forward. For that initiative, I'm going to reach out to the school system, primarily to some of the people we've worked with before. I know those were not necessarily with the Ravenna school system, but I'd like to certainly expand it to include them as well, and just get a feel for whether or not they're willing to participate. And if they are, I know some of us participated and helped with the initiative last year, and it was an interesting project. So, but we'll talk about that more, and I know the school year hasn't even begun yet.
Would you fill that in? Sounds like there's some details that are missing.
It would kind of replicate what you participated in.
Okay, I didn't know that's what you were referring to, if it was otherwise.
Well, I would like it to be a little bit more general. The one that we observed and graded or scored or whatever you want to call it was a little bit too detailed for my taste. And the students, because they were middle school students, I think were just a little bit overwhelmed with all the different particulars that were part of the assignment. So, I mean, I would like to just see an initiative where groups of students got together to talk about, just in general, some idea they believe would help enhance the future of the city of Ravenna, particularly for when they become, the residents that, if they stick around, the residents that actually run the city or, govern the city, or just residents who enjoy the city. It would be interesting to see what their perspective is. And again, my approach was, we often, when we solicit information from our residents, neglect our children, right? And that's kind of, they don't get to vote. Obviously, there are certain restrictions in what they are able to do. But after all, I mean, the future is in their hands, and I think it's important. We sometimes think, well, maybe they're not mature enough or whatever. I think I've always been surprised by the maturity and the level of deep thinking that some kids do. All kids aren't the same, but if you get a group of them together, you never know what's going to come out. So the goal would be for them, if they worked on a long-term project over the course of a school year, to then present it to city council in some forum like here. And then, whether or not we gave out some sort of prizes or whatever, just recognition for the hard work they did. And by the way, like we're doing in these types of meetings, if there's something they come up with that's really worth implementing, and that's kind of the goal, then let's do it.
I believe the detail part is critical. That way it helps them to, I'll say, think outside the box. And when I was involved in that this previous school year, I noticed if it was more detailed on what they were doing, then it would have actually helped them to get their point across much more efficiently.
I also think, though, other districts, I know Ravenna School District has done different activities that were, much different from what you guys did with that district. So, I think we do need to keep it open and let the schools kind of decide which way it goes. Because if the school decides which way it goes, they're going to be more willing to participate.
True, if we give them some ownership.
Yep.
That's why I'd like to give them just sort of like a general idea, like I just discussed. And if they want to come up with the specific rubric for grading it and the specific outline for how to present the information, and maybe different schools or different classes will have different ideas of how to present the information. But yeah, we're not going to just make it a free-for-all. We'll give them some guidance, that's for sure. Anyway, so other ideas, we talked a lot about communication in these meetings, and I'm hoping that this group we're putting together to sort of formalize and maybe automate the legislative process will also be able to provide some enhanced communication methods. Not just necessarily for ordinances, but it'd be great if in the process of having a tracking sheet come into play, and then the actual legislation during the process, through the committee process, and then ultimately for a vote, if all along that process, there was an opportunity for the public to weigh in, I think that would be helpful. I'm sure it would be helpful for all of us. And it would be interesting to see how we might generate goodwill with the residents by opening up the ability. It's not easy for all of them to attend meetings like this. And if they attend online, they really can't participate. It's a one-way directional thing for them. So this gives them time to interact with what we do in other ways. And it also may enhance how internally we handle that process, having sign-offs, making sure critical information is in place before it gets to the next stage. So I know Tyler is on that. Chelsea will be on it. Tim, I haven't asked you yet, but I was going to, because I asked the mayor last week, and he suggested you'd be a good candidate for being on this committee. I hope you will accept the invitation. And then, of course, Jonathan will help us with the technical end of it. I didn't know if anybody else on council wanted to participate in this. If so, let me know, either now or later on.
I could, just depending when it is, I didn't know if there was prospective dates and times.
No, I apologize. This last month has been hard for me to organize a meeting of that committee, so I will be doing that this week. Do you want me to include you in the email?
Yes, since there's no dates or times at this point.
Okay. Anybody else wants to participate, just let me know. Okay. We talked about, I know it came up, it was a little brief discussion, we haven't talked a lot about it, but enhanced recreational facilities, and I know with the discussion about Crystal Lake, I don't know if that really interacts here, but I believe, Dr. Calfee, you brought up the idea of having more recreational opportunities at Lake Hotchkiss, for
Lake
example.
Hotchkiss,
Yeah.
what I'd mentioned.
And I don't know if that expands for other things, programming for Parks and Recs or whatever. And I don't know if there was other things we discussed, but I wanted to bring that up. The one other thing we did talk about, and we talked about this last week as well, was public comment. And that sort of became a topic late last week. I sent out some information to council about what I kind of discovered through some research about public comment and our code, mainly that our code defaults to Robert's Rule of Order when no other specific process is defined. And Robert's Rule for Order has certain standards, let's say, for public comment, and I put those all in that email. On Friday, though, we did get a tracking sheet from an employee regarding public comment. That was mostly geared towards controlling content of public content, making sure we don't open up the door for someone to disparage one of our employees. Now, I said before, and I think you all agree, as elected officials, we're subject to criticism, and, well, we should be, right? That's kind of what we signed up for. But our employees didn't, right? They don't deserve to be, especially without advance notice and the ability to defend anything somebody might say in a public meeting, shouldn't be subject to that. And I think that was the point of this tracking sheet. But because we have a tracking sheet, and I believe it was referred to the Personnel Committee, if, Dr. Calfee, you're willing to open up the discussion of public comment through your committee, then we can continue the discussion there.
No, I am not, because it does not match well with Personnel Committee.
I think it was
idea.
brought up because of the interaction of public comment and
As pertaining to staff.
as pertaining to employees. Is there a desire for us to continue the discussion in some other committee?
Well, it needs to be discussed, and also pertaining to that, a time span when there are comments.
Well, I think there's many components, time limits, when during meetings, what meetings, how it's done. For example, in Robert's Rule of Order, without the expectation of a specific time or agenda item in a meeting devoted to public comment, then it really requires a majority vote of council to allow a non-member to speak. If it's in regards to action, that is, an ordinance is under discussion, so there's a debate, it requires 2/3 majority. So, I mean, so there are a lot of different moving parts to it. What people can say in terms of, or how long they can speak is certainly one of them. The standard seems to be 3 minutes. That doesn't have to be the standard we use. There's a, whether or not there's advance notice, whether or not you sign up, how you sign up. Those kind of things are all like logistical things we need to ferret out if we're going to go down this road.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There was a whole lot of information in the emails that you sent out to us regarding public comment in general, what procedures we have in place, what procedures we'd like to see. The tracking sheet seems almost like a peripheral thing that just got put in because of a memory of what happened in the past, and do we need to address it in some way? I think that question itself is subsumed in the larger discussion that needs to take place of what do we want and how do we want it. Probably in your email about public comment, there was probably 10 different issues that needed to be addressed and thought about. If we do allow public comment, at what point? Is it only on agenda items? Do they speak before the agenda items are addressed? Do we have the right to, in the middle of a discussion among council members, to have someone want to have public comment at that time when it's just deliberation among the council people? The whole idea is of without objection instead of voting.
Unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent is another large way of handling it. So I think there's a whole bunch of issues there that we've just kind of talked about on the periphery, and do we want to address them, or do we just want to let things continue to go as they are? I think that's something that, as council, we have to decide on before we start solving those problems.
Right.
I believe we need actual structure pertaining to those things, a little bit more structure.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And my point at this moment in time, there was, how do we get that discussion started?
So
I just mentioned personnel because that's what was in the tracking sheet.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be in personnel.
I'd like to put it on planning. I think that
Okay.
it's only fair to people in the audience to know expectations and processes
Right.
of how things operate. So if someone comes here to speak, they know what they need to do to speak.
Right.
They don't have to, I think some structure and order is helpful. It helps for more people to come and be able to participate in meetings. So we can certainly put that on my agenda for the next planning meeting.
And it's not something we're going to resolve in a meeting.
No.
I think there are a lot, like you said, many different components that need to be discussed. And ultimately, we want the public
Yeah, it's
to
almost
comment
as
on public comment.
it's almost as if each of the issues that you delineated in the email needs to have a discussion and input on.
Right.
Each of them. What is the appropriate time limit? What ways can the time limit be extended? There's a lot of detailed work there in each of those things.
A big one is, do we have the same standards throughout our committees? And that's where I think we might have a lot more flexibility. Because Robert's Rule of Order specifically says subcommittees, smaller groups, we only have 3 members on each of one of our council committees, can exercise a lot more informality, and chairs have a lot more discretion. But when the full body meets, that's when the idea of voting and unanimous consent and those types of ideas are put into play. All right, so looks like Planning Committee, we can get this discussion started. I know we always kind of end up with not a whole lot of time, but I just wanted to open the floor to any other ideas that people have.
This is not another idea, but it is a couple questions that came up regarding a discussion that we had last week about the website. And as I thought more about it and we talked more about it, I guess I don't really know who's in charge of keeping the website current and whose responsibility it is. And I think by reviewing and some review that I was doing on it, certain spots are kept up well, some are way behind, some are dead ends, et cetera. I know some organizations have a person dedicated to that there's that much work that needs to be done on it if they want to really use the website as a communication device and have up-to-date information. But I just didn't know. Is each department in charge of keeping their own section? I don't know.
I don't know that anybody really knows.
Okay.
From my understanding, it's a distributed responsibility based on different people have been given access for it, but not a codified standard of saying like, here's what your role is in doing this. Your department should be posting this information, here's how you do it. Kind of like, what's the expectation for the person that takes on that miniature webmaster role for their department, you know?
Well, if we're talking about communication as one of the projects here, special projects that we're wanting to work on and talk about, it seems like that might be something that we need to look at to see. I don't, it's just raising a question, not offering a solution at all.
Yeah, and I know we do have this other committee we're about to organize, and I don't want it to be a catch-all for just about any discussion we have on council, but that could be a place, since we will have some technical expertise on that committee, to start a discussion about that. And I think there are some fundamental problems. One is there's no person, right? There's no
Centralized
overarching,
administrator,
whose responsibility is to make sure all those distributed entities or people are on board. There's no real training, right? No formal training. There's no for bigger organizations like university or something, we have branding standards, right? And then there are people who will look at your website and say, oh, you didn't use the right logo, or this is too big, or it's not. The big thing these days, Ms. West, you'll be happy to hear, is accessibility. How accessible is it to hearing impaired or visually impaired people? If we have audio or something, that would be certainly an issue. So there are a lot of things that and we're not really big enough for that, right? I mean, we don't have the luxury of hiring people to do all those sort of esoteric types of activities. But where do we go from where we are now to the ideal? How do we get there, and what standards do we want to put in place?
One organization I belonged to in the past, there was a dedicated webmaster, and that he or she had taken care of everything that would go on that site. I mean, every single thing. Things were directed to that individual, and then it was followed through from there.
Right.
Was that in Jonathan's job description?
No.
I doubt it.
Well, I mean, having one or two people to be able to be in charge of it, I think right now, there's a few of us that have access to change the website. I couldn't tell you how to do it. I have access.
You do?
But I
I
was
don't.
never shown how to do it. So that kind of complicates things, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, some training on how to do it. And I think there's, like, Full Spectrum Media does our website. So we could build in accessibility. I mean, they know how to do that. So those are things that we can do. But we just have to figure out, like, the basics. Who is in charge of putting things on? Where does the information come from? Like the tree of, like, how things go. And then from there, work with them on how to put it on there. Like, we almost need trained on how to utilize the
And checks and
website.
balances.
What do you
Checks and
mean Full
balances.
Spectrum Media does our
So,
website?
They design and maintain our website. There are
the host.
They host it, yeah. So there are people that can go in and add things and change things, but they're the ones that created the website in the first place. So we could go to them and say, we want to make it more accessible, or we want to update this, and they kind of help us through that. So they,
And if we come up with some
And they should
portal,
be able to provide training as well.
Correct.
For those who would be tasked with the updates.
and having just one person do it is tough, because what happens if that one person leaves? So having two people trained to be able to do that, and then train others to show people how to use it, how to run it.
I just don't know that we've got a budget to support a full-time webmaster.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we should not silo, whatever we do with any form of communication, we should not silo it to one person. Because
I
what
don't-
if- because it is checks and balances.
Yeah.
What if that person leaves?
Single
What if
points
that
of
person
failure,
goes
yeah.
on vacation? what if they decide not to come to work again? I mean, then there's someone else that's able to step in and do
There
the
should
job.
definitely be, I think that the department heads, because they have the knowledge of what's going on in their department and some of the, the exciting things, or if there's an emergency closure or something like that, I would like to see department heads have accessibility to the website and be able to update it. Especially some information, it might be once a year, but there could be other information that could be, weekly or monthly that would be good for the residents to know. There's a lot of outdated information throughout our site that I think that if department heads had the ability to update their own stuff and tell them this is a way to showcase your department and what you do for our city, because a lot of people don't realize how much our departments do. I think it would be
Yeah.
a great opportunity, and then you have more than one person.
Yeah, it's true. I think the biggest problem with distributed content enhancement is each individual has different levels of comfort, different level of understanding and expertise in doing these types of things. And so some are rush out there and and others kind of just avoid
Templates are a
it.
great thing.
Yeah, I know.
And a little bit of
It's not-
training.
Trust me, I learned very quickly how to manage a website all by myself, and it was something that I was terrified to do. It's not that difficult when it's a preset with templates, and
Right.
you have.
I
these are-
I
These are
know.
the blocks of information, and this is where you put it and what you're putting in there.
And then just even having an expectation of a standard, it's like if you have an update, like here's the structure, here's the font, speaking to like the style guide that you were talking about, Mr. Calfee. But if we really clarify expectations and just have a cleaner procedure for this, I feel that the more basic and simple updates is like, here's how you upload a file and things, like it's not going to be as challenging, but we'll also want to have some content standards, because you don't want to have someone post something that might not be conducive to the public's outreach for the
Or
city.
grammatical errors.
Yeah.
Spelling counts?
Or, I mean, the fundamental problem with a lot of websites over time is broken links. So somebody to do analytics to see how often pages are hit, and then also how often or when to replace outdated links.
And it's due. I mean, there's a lot of things on there that's great, and there's a lot of things on there that needs to be replaced. But the internet is one of our prime forms of communication now, so that really needs to be, that's where people go. People Google things or Siri things when they want to find something out.
Okay, well, I think we will have a little bit of discussion with that committee that we organize, and maybe that will help stimulate some ideas on how we can move forward with that. Unfortunately, we are at the end of this particular special meeting. Thank you all again for showing up a little early and participating for a great discussion. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's turn it off and turn it back on for the committee of the whole.